Well, welcome to TC3. Glad you guys are here today. If you're joining us for one of the first times, my name is Kunz. I'm the Connections and Young Adults Pastor here at TC3. And so excited to be with you guys here today and wrapping up this series in the book of Esther. Now, if you haven't been with us over the past couple of weeks, I want to kind of give us a 30,000-foot, snapshot of kind of what we've been walking through in the book of Esther. I want to make sure that we have a full understanding of what we've read thus far in this book, what the story of Esther really is about. So I'm going to give you just from chapter 1 through where we're going to be in today in Esther chapter 9. I'd encourage you, if you have your Bible, go ahead and turn to Esther chapter 9. We'll read a couple of verses right there. But to give you kind of a recap, if you will, we open up the book of Esther with this king, the king of Persia. And he decides in the beginning that he is going to throw this massive banquet. Why? Well, because like any good king, he needs to throw a banquet to show how great he is. That's what you do, right? I mean, as an arrogant king, you're going to throw a banquet and say, "Look at how great I am." Well, he's at this banquet. He's been tipping a few back, if you know what I mean, and he's had one too many. He's drunk at this point, and he calls for his wife to come into this banquet, this party, to show off how beautiful she is. Now, husbands, you can somewhat relate in this moment because there has been a time where you have asked your wife to do something and she has looked at you and said, "You're an idiot." Right? We have all been there. I know for a fact, more times than not, that is normally the case in my household. My wife is like, "No, you're an idiot." She loves me, don't get me wrong, but it's great, right? But we can kind of relate to that. But that's essentially what the queen does here. She looks at the king and she sends back word to him and says, "I ain't doing that. There's no way I'm going to step into this banquet just to flaunt my beauty. I'm not your trophy queen," right? That's what she says. Well, the king, he's, like I said, been tipping a few back, so he's not in the greatest state of mind. Well, he gets furious, super ticked off, and he ends up depossessing his wife, his queen, saying, "I no longer want you to be the queen. I want you to leave and don't ever come back." That's what he does. Well, this is kind of the point where any good king, we would all probably make this same decision, I would think, right? Any good king that loses his queen, what do? You throw a beauty pageant. It makes total sense, right? That's just what you do. Massive beauty pageant. So he throws this beauty pageant in order to identify and pick the next queen. At this point, he's queenless and needs a new queen. Throws this beauty pageant, and this is the point where we're introduced to our two main characters in the book of Esther. Esther and Mordecai. Esther, who is a Jew, Mordecai also a Jew. Esther enters into this beauty contest, this beauty pageant, and lo and behold, she wins. She wins this beauty pageant, and the king looks at her and becomes infatuated with her. Now, mind you, again, she has not told him that she is Jewish. She hid her identity. So the king is now infatuated, and she becomes the queen. It's at this point we're introduced to this other character we talked about last week by the name of Haman. If you remember, we talked about last week, Haman built this massive stake in his front yard, in his driveway, to kill Mordecai, to impale Mordecai on. Brutal, I know, but that's what he did. And why? Well, Haman had been elevated to this position in the land that was the highest position apart from the king. So much such a high position that the king of Persia had demanded that all people in the land, when Haman would walk by, they were to bow to him. Well, Haman's walking down the street one day, passes Mordecai, and Mordecai's like, I ain't doing that. I ain't bowing down to this dude. There is no possible way I'm going to bow before Haman. Well, this ticks Haman off. He's a little bit of a hothead. Right, ticks him off, frustrates him beyond belief, and then he finds out, to put icing on the cake, he finds out that Mordecai is a Jew. Well, Haman ends up going back to the king, infuriated. Goes back to the king again. Surprise, surprise, the king is drunk again. Haman persuades the king to enact this decree. Essentially, this decree would wipe out all the Jews in the land. If one of them was bad, they're all bad. That's what Haman said. So the king is persuaded and says, "Okay, let's do it." Well, Haman, in order to decide the day of infamy, if you will, to decide the day of this imminent doom and death of the Jews, rolls his die to pick the date. In Hebrew, the name for die is Pur, P-U-R. I want you to hold on to that for just a moment. As we fast forward the story a little bit, the plot has kind of shifted. Now, all of a sudden, Haman is now the bad guy, not just behind the scenes bad guy. The king knows it, Mordecai knows it, everybody knows that Haman is now the enemy. At the time, it was illegal to wipe out a decree, to cancel out a decree. So the king, now knowing that Esther is a Jew, Mordecai is a Jew, is like, I don't want the Jews to die. I love these people. So he enacts this counter decree. And in this counter decree, it gives the Jews liberation, opportunity to defend themselves against Haman's plot to kill all the Jews. So they find themselves in this position, and all of a sudden, the Jews are winning. The Jews no longer are under the thumbprint of Haman. They have now defeated Haman. The king has instructed that Haman die on the very stake that he had built to kill Mordecai. And his family, supporters, followers of Haman, all of them killed by the Jews. And that's where we pick it up in Esther chapter 9. The Jews have now been liberated from this moment, from this complete and imminent doom. And we pick it up in verse 20 in chapter 9. It says this: Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to the Jews near and far throughout all the provinces of King Xerxes, calling on them to celebrate an annual festival on these 2 days. He told them to celebrate these days with feasting and gladness by giving gifts of food to each other and presents to the poor. This would commemorate a time when the Jews gained relief from their enemies, when their sorrow was turned into gladness and their mourning into joy. Now, the name of this 2-day celebration is Purim, Purim, named after the very die that was to determine their imminent death. But what's really awesome, this account in the book of Esther was recorded approximately 2,500 years ago. Do you know what the Jews still do to this day? Celebrate Purim. It's a 2-day celebration that continues today. That they take a step back and they celebrate a moment in their history, a moment in their past where God has done something awesome. God liberated them, delivered them from a moment of absolute imminent death. And they stop and they celebrate. You know, I can't help but read this passage of scripture and think to myself, man, when was the last time that we sat and really celebrated what God has done? You know, every so often you'll hear some cool stories that are going on in the life of the church, or you hear some numbers which are great, and we'll kind of get the golf clap, yay, and that's great, it's exciting. But I really want you guys to be able to see behind the curtain. You know, for us on staff, for a lot, that's why we get up every day, because we hear these stories. We know what God is doing. We get to be a part of what God is doing. And so often, I think sometimes you guys don't necessarily feel like or see everything that God is doing. And I want to provide a picture for you today of how awesome our God is and what he's doing, because he's on the move. And I want to share that with you today. So can I do that? Can I share a couple of stories with you? Okay, the 4 people over here, thank you. So glad. I'm pretty sure Cheryl's a fellow staff member too. Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Okay, but I want to share some of these awesome stories with you. I had the opportunity this past week to sit down with our children's pastor, Andy Brown, who, if you have never met Andy, he is a certified psychopath in the best way. Love Andy Brown to death. I could rave about him all day and night as a children's pastor. He is by far the best children's pastor I have ever worked with or seen. And I mean that when I say that. So he is awesome. But I had the opportunity just to hear some of the cool things that God is doing in the children's ministry. You know, they've had 7 kids baptized already this year. And on August 13th, here in just a few short weeks, we have another beach baptism as a church that they have more kids on that list. And I'd also tell you that because I want to encourage you, if you've never been baptized, if you've made the decision to follow Christ, you've never been baptized, I would highly encourage you to be a part of that baptism service, because that is your first step of obedience. So I want to make sure that you know that. August 13th at Dolman Beach, 4 o'clock. Make sure that you're there. But they baptized 7 kids already this year. They have averaging on a weekend 180 kids upstairs. 180 kids. That's awesome. They had over 200 kids at VBS. 200 kids. 35 kids made decisions for Christ at VBS. That's awesome. That is awesome. They raised $1,100 for a ministry that provides mosquito nets to children and their families in Uganda. These are fifth graders and below. $1,100. Andy Brown has the opportunity to be in 5 local schools on a weekly basis in a ministry that we call Kids Club. Andy was one of the pioneers for that ministry in these public schools, but he has the opportunity to go in there before schools, after school. It's different at every school, but he has the opportunity to go in, build a relationship with these kids, disciple them, grow them in their relationship with the Lord, provide gospel presentations and love on kids and faculty in public schools. God is on the move. And those are just some of the numbers, and while the numbers are great, I don't know if you've heard the stories of what's coming out of the children's ministry. Like the third grader. Every single week, he has this third grade girl that comes upstairs to his class, and she is ready to hand over her 10% tithe from her allowance that week. Because she understands the discipline, the spiritual discipline of tithing. She understands that God can do more with her 10% than she can do with 100%. She's a third grader. That is awesome. Or maybe the fourth grader. I don't know if you heard about this story, but they have a fourth grader that comes upstairs who a few weeks back shared the gospel with his unbelieving uncle. Fourth grader. He came up to Andy Brown and was like, hey, Andy, I don't know if I did it right. I shared the gospel with my uncle, but I don't know if I did it right. Can we just pray for him? A fourth grader. A fourth grader. Or maybe the fifth grader. I don't know if you've heard this story. The fifth grader that came several months back started coming, and then he invited a friend. Now that friend has invited a friend. That friend has invited a friend. Yeah, that friend has now invited a friend. There are 4 families connected to the life of the church, getting plugged in to the life of TC3 because a fifth grader invited his friend. That is God on the move. You know, it's not just the children's ministry either that God's doing awesome things. He's doing a lot of awesome things in a lot of other places. Our student ministry, for example. Our student ministry is unreal. And some of the kids that are in this ministry will knock your socks off in the best way. One of the things that we do on a Wednesday night is we break them out into small groups. Chris breaks them out into small groups. It's gender specific and grade specific. We have an 8th grade girls group that a few months back decided that they wanted to partner with a ministry in East Stewart that TC3 partners with. And they wanted to go over to this after-school program. It's called Building Bridges to Youth. They wanted to go over to this after-school program and love on the kids that are a part of this after-school program in East Stewart before they come to midweek on a Wednesday night. 8th grade girls. Mind you, this was not a TC3, oriented thing. We didn't set this up for them to step into this. The leaders identified the need. These girls identified the need in that community, in that ministry, and said, I'll go. Send me. 8th grade girls. That's awesome. They're starting to see more and more students step into leadership roles, step into their gift sets, the things that they didn't even know that they were passionate about and love. These students are stepping into that. If you just come on a Wednesday night and you hear the student band, and there's like a 12-year-old playing drums, you're like, what am I doing with my life? I'm like, this is a 12-year-old kicking my butt. Like, this is awesome. These guys are incredible. There was a 7th grade girl that came up to Stephen a little while back, and she had tried out for the worship team, and she had come to him and said, Stephen, I just need you to know, this is an answered prayer. This is an answered prayer. I know that I've been needing to lead worship for my fellow students. 7th grade girl. That is awesome. God is on the move. The student leadership team in the student ministry has grown by 30%. They have baptized 6 students. Again, more to come here in just a few short weeks. They've seen 23 decisions for Christ in the student ministry. They raised a few months back in a 4-week time span, they raised $1,800 to go to a ministry called Destiny Rescue, which is a Philippine-based ministry that rescues young women, young girls from sex slavery. $1,800 to go to that ministry. That's awesome. Chris Bell, our student pastor, has the opportunity during the school year to be in 2 public schools, partnering with a ministry called First Priority. He has the opportunity to go into these schools and preach the gospel in a public school. He also has the opportunity this coming season, this coming football season, to do something that was created, a position that was created this year. He gets to be the chaplain for the Jensen Beach football team. That is huge. That is God on the move. He's doing awesome things. We have a ministry on Tuesday nights called The Well. It's our college and young adults, young singles, young marrieds ministry that meets right over here in the overflow room on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. And we're seeing some awesome things in that ministry too. I have the honor, the privilege to be over that ministry and hang out with those guys and girls over there. I absolutely love it. Beginning of this year, a few of us on the team, on the Well team, sat down to kind of decide how we're going. We knew we needed to relaunch and rebrand the Well in a big way, and then set some pretty serious goals. 3 of the goals that we had decided on was we knew that we wanted to grow as a ministry in our prayer discipline, our spiritual depth, and a culture of worship. And y'all, I got to tell you, all 3 of those things are happening. And it's not just like, yeah, it's happening. I'm saying, this is blatantly obvious. Not anything I did, not anything Stephen did, or Michelle did, or Zach did, anybody else that's a part of the Well. It's 100% because God is on the move. We've seen awesome growth in numbers. We've grown from 25 to about 50 in the past 6 months. That's awesome. We have 50 young adults, college students, young singles, young marrieds in that room on a weekly basis. We've kind of become a hub, if you will, for college and young adults in this area. There's not a ton of college and young adult ministries at other churches in this area, so we've kind of become this hub for these college and young adults to come to. Do you know on a weekly basis, we have anywhere between 5 and 7 churches represented in that room right over there? That's awesome. That is God on the move. We're seeing these college and young adult students, these college students and young adults step into roles of leadership and out of their comfort zone. One of the things that I've really learned, it's not the teaching. As awesome as it is, it's not the worship. It's not even, believe it or not, the amazing cereal bar that we have. You'd think for college students, free food would be it's not. The thing that continues to bring them back is the community. They are hungry for a group of guys and girls in their season of life that they can do life with, where Christ is the foundation, where Christ is the focal point. And that's what they get to be a part of at the Well. And it's awesome to see the community that is building. As TC3 as a whole, in TC3 as a whole, there are, mind-blowing things. We literally could, I kid you not, y'all, we could literally stand up here all day and share stories about the things that God is doing. And you all could probably come up on this stage and share stories about God moving in your own life, or moving within the church in a specific way that probably nobody else knows about. But God is doing incredible things. Did you know that we've given out over 220 new believers packets this year already? 220 people have sat in the chairs that you are sitting in right now and raised their hand to say, Jesus, I want you to be Lord of my life. And they've grabbed the new believers packet, walking in newness of life. That was the decisions that were made here. 220. We've baptized over 25 people already. Again, another baptism coming up, and I checked the sign-ups the other night just to see how many people were signed up. That number's about to double. That's God on the move. We've sent over 50 people through our Starting Point growth track. That Starting Point growth track is that thing that you get annoyed with that I say on the TC3 News like every other day. You hear it all the time, right? It's that thing that we encourage you, if you've never been a part of the church, or you're new to the church, or new just to church as a whole, it's a great opportunity to get connected and plugged into the church. Find out more about us, but more specifically, you find out more about yourself. We've sent 50 people through that already. We have now grown to 240 weekly viewers on our online campus. 240 people weekly tune in to watch us online. So if you are watching us online, if you're joining us right now, I want to thank you for being a part of what God is doing in this place. You are absolutely just as much a part of what God is doing at TC3 as anybody sitting in this room. But 240 people. That's awesome. We've sent over 400 people through life groups at some point in time. 400 people. We have over 30 groups that are active live right now that are meeting and growing in groups, which is awesome. But do the math on that for me really quick. 400 into 30 groups. We need more groups, y'all. God is doing awesome things in life groups. I want to encourage you, if you are interested in maybe hosting or leading a life group, I want to invite you out on August 20th in this room from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. We have our life group leader dinner. It's not only for people that are already life group leaders, but it is also for those that are interested in being a life group leader or hosting a life group. It allows you the opportunity to come in here to hear the big kind of mission and vision for life groups, the models that you can see for life groups. You get to connect with other leaders, ask them questions, grow with them. It's going to be an awesome evening. But life groups are doing awesome things, and the stories that are coming out of those small group times are unbelievably incredible. You know, we partner with a lot of different ministries in the church. I shared a little bit earlier with you about building bridges to youth. That's a ministry in East Stewart, and we partnered with for a little while. Several months back, we had the opportunity to go into their facility and completely renovate it. I mean, top to bottom, completely renovated. It was a job. But let me tell you, they are now able to use that facility to maximum capacity. Hosting after-school programs for kids in unfortunate situations. And God's moving in big ways over there. We partner with a ministry called the Bridge Outreach Ministry. You might have heard about this one. This is a ministry that meets in our back parking lot every Friday, and there are right about 100 people that come out to this thing, and I kid you not, they line up this entire side of the building over here with groceries. It's like one massive grocery aisle, and these people that cannot afford groceries on their own can come and go shopping. It's awesome. We partner with a ministry called 4 Kids of South Florida. Some of you sitting in this room are foster parents. 4 Kids of South Florida's mission is to give a home to every child in the state of Florida. And they are well on their way to accomplishing that mission. And God's doing amazing things in that ministry. We partner with a ministry called CareNet Crisis Pregnancy Center. If you did not know this, I'd like to make sure that you know right out of the gate, we are 100% pro-life at this church. And we support the mission and vision of CareNet Crisis Pregnancy Center. They're a local nonprofit that focuses solely on abortion prevention and recovery. They offer alternative options, all different types of things, counseling sessions. It is an incredible ministry that's very near and dear to my heart. If you follow us on any social media, this past week we put a video out of a guy by the name of Bob Zacchio, who's over a ministry that we partner with called Project Lift. Project Lift is a ministry based in Palm City. It brings in young troubled boys, young troubled men, teaches them a trade, walks them through a 12-step counseling, and then sends them on their way, trained and ready to go. It's the teach a man to fish mentality. God is doing awesome things, and he's on the move. You know, we've got people from every background, every life experience, every demographic serving somewhere in the church. I got to tell you, it's one of the coolest things for me. I'm over the TC3 teams. Any kind of volunteer coordination is kind of one of the things that I'm over. So I get to kind of help people find that niche, find the thing that really gets them connected, find that place that they're most passionate about and those types of things. And it's one of the coolest things to take a step back and to see someone, knowing their past, that has had a rough life, not known the Lord their entire life, spent time in prison for some serious crimes, come into a relationship with Jesus and serve next to somebody that has never known a day without Jesus in their life. And they find relationship on the common ground of Christ. That's awesome. That's awesome. And to see people come into that place where they're realizing, okay, I have this passion, I have this gift. Where can I use it within the church? A cool story, you might have heard this before, I don't know, but we have a lady in the church who is an incredibly gifted seamstress. And for years, she was trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do with this? How do I use my gifting here to glorify God, to bring God? I mean, I don't really know. And then she believes that she had this voice from the Lord that said, you're going to make dresses. And she was like, what? I'm going to do what? One year after Honduras, a few years back, she came home and realized, I got it. I'm supposed to make dresses for the girls in Honduras. To this day, we have given out 600 dresses to girls in Honduras. That is God on the move. We're seeing life change happen in the lives of the people at TC3. I don't know if you guys know your worship leaders. I don't know if you know your staff guys. We're screw-ups. Just need to be honest with you. There is not an ounce of perfection in any of us. We've got pasts. We still have issues today, just like anybody else. But there are some awesome things that are going on in this stage that you may not even know about. One example. The guy that was leading worship right here this morning was Ross. In 2014, Ross was sitting in this very room, right up here in the balcony, in the stands. And he gave his life to Christ when he came in with a recovery group. And he's now leading worship on a Sunday morning. That's awesome. That is God on the move. In the student ministry, we've got a leader that you guys probably know, you might have heard of, or you've seen him, or you've heard him in the service. His name is Squeaky Kelly. He's sitting right down here to my left. You probably have heard Squeaky. He's the guy that's always going like the Ric Flair, woo! Squeaky. And his heart for the Lord is incredible, but a lot of us might know who he is, but we don't necessarily know his story. Squeaky was a drug dealer, a drug addict, a smuggler, addicted to sex, addicted to alcohol, a broken life. And 8 years ago, Squeaky came in to this church, invited by one of the guys that's actually still one of the bass players in the band here at TC3, was invited, and Squeaky thought he was coming to like a concert to hear this band. He came to church. Praise Jesus. Came to church, and little did he know it would be that night that he realized he had a void in his heart. And there's only one person that could ever fill it. No drug could ever fill it. No relationship could ever fill it. Jesus is the only one that could fill it. And he gave his life to Christ that night, and he hasn't left since. That is God on the move. And y'all make sure you pray for him, because now he's a small group leader to 8th grade boys. Please be praying for him, all right? God is doing some incredible things, and he is on the move. Every year you hear us talk about this Honduras mission trip. You saw a video, a little recap of some of the things we got to experience this past year in Honduras. And if you've never been, if you've heard us talk about this and you're like, nah, it's just not for me, I would highly encourage you to change your thinking. If you don't believe any of the guys on stage or on the videos or anything like that says, hey, you should consider going, would love to take you, I want to challenge you to ask somebody that's been. And I can guarantee you without fail, you will hear from these people. They will tell you, put aside your fear of a third world country. Put aside your fear of traveling. Put aside whatever stipulation you believe about this country of Honduras, because God is bigger than your fear. God is bigger than any stipulation or any title that any country will ever get. God is bigger than you worrying about your safety. God is moving on this mission trip. We've been a part of this thing for over 10 years. God is moving. And I didn't super encourage you, challenge you to be a part of that, because it is life altering. We've given out thus far in 3 years, 2,000 water filters. If you do the math on that, the conservative number is 8,000 people with clean water now. 8,000 people. But what's even cooler is the fact that those are 2,000 water filters in 2,000 homes. Every single one of them have a gospel presentation on them. 2,000 homes receiving clean water from the very thing that says Jesus is Lord in their homes. That's awesome. That is God on the move. 2,000 water filters. We kind of started this new phase in projects this year as we are continuing to kind of branch out of San Rafael. We're getting so far out with the water filters that we're kind of trying to identify some other areas that we can serve the community. And one of the things that we discovered this year that we could do is concrete floors. Most of the homes that we come into contact with, that we go into in Honduras, have dirt floors. So we have the opportunity now, as we move into this new phase of projects, in the coming years, we're installing concrete floors. We had the opportunity this past, about a month ago now, to host a VBS for about 500 kids. Andy Brown was busy. It was mass chaos, but man, it was incredible. Gave out 300 dresses. Ended up doing something for the boys this year. We gave out 300 capes, and they loved it. It was so awesome, and God did some incredible things in Honduras. But you know what's really awesome? What's awesome is Dario. Dario is one of the young adults that comes to the well on a weekly basis. About 18 months ago, Dario gave his life to Christ. His past includes some serious addictions, some serious struggles, not pursuing the Lord whatsoever. No desire to know Jesus. 18 months ago, gives his life to Christ, and just a few months ago, he had decided he wanted to be a part of this mission journey to Honduras. He didn't know anybody. Apart from myself and two other guys on staff, Dario knew nobody. His past, he's Colombian, fluent in Spanish, somewhat. He's fluent in Spanish to us, not necessarily culturally fluent in Spanish in Honduras, but let me tell you, to know that 18 months ago, he was an addict running away from Jesus. And 4 weeks ago, he was preaching the good news of Jesus Christ in Spanish. That is awesome. That is God on the move. I got a text message this past week from a friend that shared with me that one of the guys that went on the week 2 trip just a few weeks back actually gave his life to Christ last week as a result of where he saw God move in Honduras. That's awesome. His life will forever be different. His family will forever be different. His marriage will be forever different. Y'all, God is on the move. You know, we read through the book of Esther, and Mordecai at one point comes to Esther, and Gordon hit on this last week. Mordecai comes to Esther and he says, Esther, I believe that you've been appointed for such a time as this. Y'all, I can't help but stand before you today and think, man, God has appointed you. God has appointed me for such a time as this. He could have placed us at any point in the life of this church, but he chose to use you. He chose to use me now. Now listen, I don't want you to walk away here today saying, man, our church is awesome. Man, we're doing a lot of great humanitarian work and church is just doing great things. If you walk away saying how great our church is, I have done something wrong here today. We're not awesome. God is awesome. And I don't stand before you to say that just because out of obligation to make sure that you guys know, the church is humble. You guys know me. I'm pretty transparent. So what I'm telling you right now is from my very gut, the very depths of my heart, that every ounce of what we do and why we do it, why we wake up in the morning is because of what I just shared with you here today. That God is on the move. And he is doing incredible things, whether we're in it or not. But he's choosing to use you. He's choosing to use me. He's on the move. And he's got big things planned. I want to close out today with just an easy, practical, simple challenge. As we're in this moment, this season of celebrating what God has done, kind of in our own Purim celebration, if you will. I want to challenge us with a question. When was the last time that we sat and thanked God for 5 things, as opposed to asking God for 5 things? If my money was on it, I'd say we're pretty good at asking for 5 things. Not nearly as good at thanking God for 5 things. So this is my challenge. For the next 48 hours, this morning, I want you to write down those 5 things. What are those 5 things that you're grateful for? And for the next 48 hours, I want you to catch yourself. I want you to catch yourself. In those moments where you're like, man, God, God, do you mind if God, would you just mind doing, don't ask. I want you to say, no, God, thank you. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're going to do. I want you to write those 5 things down. For the next 48 hours, that's what I want you to do. Listen, if the Jews can keep doing this for 2,500 years, I think we can do the next 2 days. Y'all, God is moving. God is moving. And he's doing awesome, awesome things. And it's just the beginning. Let's pray together. Lord, I cannot thank you enough that you would choose us for a time such as this, that you would appoint us for a time such as this. Lord, I think if we were honest with ourselves, we would all agree that we are completely unworthy to be used by you. But Lord, you choose us anyway. You mobilize us anyway. You do amazing things through us, with us anyway. God, I pray that we would put our pride aside, that we would put ourselves aside, and our lives would be dedicated to solely glorifying your name. Because God, that's what we're here. That's what it's about. That's all we want it to be about. For your glory and your kingdom. We love you. Pray all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.